Hello. This is the transcript that will become the book, The Seven Deadly Sins of Networking. And I just want to share a little bit about why I wrote the book, and then we'll talk about the book itself. So we have the seven deadly sins, and we're going to balance this because we have seven deadly sins of networking offset by the seven redeeming virtues of networking. So for every vice, we're going to share a virtue. Now, the reason I thought this book needed to be written is I believe that there is a lot of terrible networking out there. And honestly, I think most people don't network badly on purpose. They just don't know the difference. So, we're going to talk about the seven deadly sins, and I'm going to share real examples. I'm going to share stories from my life. And the goal is not to tell you what to do or to judge you. It's just to give you some insights into what works well in networking and what doesn't. So my why is really, really simple. I see a lot of bad networking. I try to correct it wherever I can. However, I think examples and stories are a better way than actually lecturing and teaching. So this is my little foray into the seven deadly sins of networking. And the reality is the seven deadly sins or cardinal sins, whatever you want to call them, capital vices, these things rear their head a lot. And I want to share the good and the bad. So I'm going to share the vice and the virtue. So I personally believe I just want to state up front that this book is going to mainly be tongue in cheek. My intention is not to offend. I am simply using the seven deadly sins analogy to educate. Please take this book with a grain of salt. I am Catholic by upbringing, so this is my sense of humor. I apologize if this offends you. If it does offend you, stop reading now because it's just going to get worse. Um, so please take this book with a grain of salt. The seven, the seven deadly sins are part of the Catholic religion. According to Catholic teachings, the price of committing the seven deadly sins, any one of them, is eternal death or damnation. So the consequences are severe. Salvation can be had by confessing your sins and completing acts of penance. So, this book, I'm both confessing, admitting, acknowledging, and hopefully asking for penance. Um, Again, tongue in cheek, I want to make the world a better place. I want to elevate my personal networking to an art form. That's not judgment on you, it is all about how I want to be in the world. So, the good news is that committing the seven deadly sins of networking will not jeopardize your soul. It will not impact your eternal afterlife. However, committing one or more of the seven deadly sins of networking will deeply impact the results you will achieve through your networking efforts. Consistently committing these seven deadly sins will have a negative impact on your efforts in networking. The more sins you commit, the more chances you will have to practice your skills at apologizing. Fair warning, many networks will banish you from their community if they perceive you to be a threat or you continue to commit the seven deadly sins of networking. All other networking sins stem from or are manifestations of the said seven deadly sins of networking. Each sin demonstrates the lack of this corresponding networking virtue. This lack can be corrected by strengthening oneself in the opposing virtue. So, my final caveat, these are my views, and you may disagree about some or all of the points I make. That is perfectly fine with me. I do not ask that you consider, I do ask that you consider that there might be a bit of merit to my dissertation. I believe we can all grow by sharing ideas. I humbly ask you that when you feel disagreement, ask yourself what lesson you might learn from that sense of disagreement. So, the seven deadly sins, as I see them, and the corresponding virtue. So, pride is the first of the seven deadly sins. Humility is the corresponding virtue. So, pride is, in this context, pride is loving and esteeming oneself above others. Humility is selflessness and a modest view of one's importance. So, you can see that humility balances pride. And I see pride in networking a lot. We'll cover the details. I'll get into more stories. Um, Now I'm just going to go through the seven sins, the seven deadly sins, and I'll share the redeeming virtue. So the second deadly sin is envy, and envy is resenting others for their networking skills, or business results. The redeeming virtue is gratitude, and gratitude is the virtue of being thankful and the readiness to show appreciation for and to return kindness. So, envy offset by gratitude. Number three of the deadly sins is gluttony, and that's consuming to an unhealthy excess. The redeeming virtue is temperance, which is restraint or moderation in action, thought, or feeling. Number four, lust. Lust is intense longing or unbridled desire, such as for money or power. I'm going to say this shows up in networking as something called the dreaded commission breath. Chastity is the redeeming virtue that offsets lust, and it is a quality held by someone pure of heart and modest in nature. The next deadly sin is anger. So that's the fifth deadly sin is anger, or wrath if you want to go Old Testament. Anger is acting hostile or desiring revenge. Anger is offset by patience. Patience is acting with meekness, mercy, and charity when resolving conflicts. The sixth deadly sin is greed, and greed is desiring material things to excess, placing too much importance on possessions. The redeeming virtue for greed is generosity. Generosity is giving freely of your time, talents, and other gifts, realizing that no material thing is more important than your relationships in your network. And the final seventh deadly sin of networking is sloth. Sloth is avoiding work for the sake of comfort. The redeeming virtue that offsets sloth is diligence, and diligence is doing the work even if it sacrifices your comfort. Okay, so those are the seven deadly sins and the redeeming virtues. So we will explore each pairing in turn. And what we will do is discuss pride first, as pride is often thought to be the source and promoter of the other deadly sins. Again, I'm proposing my own definitions for the vices and virtues as I apply them to networking. I beg your indulgence as I share my framework. You're welcome to share yours. So, again, as we said, pride is loving and esteeming oneself above others. Humility is selflessness and a modest view of one's importance. Prideful networkers expect others to serve them and only them. Humble networkers serve others first, recognizing that we all win together. When it comes to networking, I like the phrase the go giver or giver's gain. Those are respectively, the go giver is based on the book of the same name by Bob Berg and John David Mann. And Giver's Gain is the foundation of Business Networking International, BNI, as created by Dr. Ivan Meisner. So I believe that humble and humility go in hand with go giver and giver's gain. So the goal is to make sure we all win together. Now, let's talk about envy, and that's resenting others for their networking skills, or business results. Gratitude is the virtue of being thankful and the readiness to show appreciation for and to return kindness. So I see a lot of people who say, "Oh, I wish I had your network," or, if only this or if only that. The reality is, being jealous of someone's network is pointless. There's a Chinese proverb: the best time to plant an an oak tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. So if you haven't been building your network, you need to start today. So instead of being envious of someone who has built a network, just be diligent, be grateful for where you're at, and honestly reach out and ask for help. People who are good at networking are usually happy to share their tips and expertise. Now, three, gluttony, that is consuming to an unhealthy excess. Temperance is restraint or moderation in action, thought, or feeling. And I see gluttony in networking. A lot of people who aren't really aware of networking, they'll network. They go to as many events as they can. The reality is that's like overeating and then saying, "Okay, I don't need to eat for the rest of the year." You need to have a little bit of temperance or restraint in your networking, and you need to have a purpose. Number four, lust is intense longing or unbridled desire, such as for money or power. Chastity is a quality held by someone pure of heart and modest in nature. Um, I could insert some dad jokes here. I will do that later. Number five is anger, or as I said, Old Testament wrath is acting hostile or desiring revenge. Patience is acting with meekness, mercy, and charity when resolving conflicts. Number six, greed is desiring material things to excess, placing too much importance on possessions. Generosity is giving freely of your time, talents, and other gifts, realizing that no material thing is more important than your relationships in your network. And number seven, sloth, is avoiding work for the sake of comfort. Diligence is doing the work even if it sacrifices your comfort. I see way too much pride. So we're going to go into some detail now. I've kind of covered my framework. Um, I see a lot where pride is a big thing in those who are new to networking. They think they know more than others, so therefore they try to show off. The price of pride is incredibly steep. If you are lucky, most good networkers will ignore you or set you straight. I say lucky because I've seen really seasoned networks take a personal interest in teaching prideful networkers the error of their ways. This is not common, but I have seen it. A bit of a bit of public humiliation is not my personal favorite experience. I'd rather avoid it. I recommend you do as well. Having witnessed a few of these lessons being delivered, I can say that neither party looks good in the interaction. So it's best to avoid it at all costs. Now, I am all in favor of healthy self esteem. The key here is balance. Remember, one way networking will never, ever yield long term results. You might get an introduction or a referral today, but you will struggle long term. I've been guilty of pride on more occasions than I care to remember, but it does not feel natural to me personally. So I tend to err on the side of humility. Humility is my natural self. Some people who don't know me call me arrogant or standoffish. It's not prideful to be. If you are good at something and say you're good at it, that's not being prideful. Pride is when you put yourself above others. I personally serve, so therefore I don't think I make the mistake of pride too often. But the good news is the world will set me straight and keep me humble if I need it. So I personally enjoy networking more when I serve others first. To be clear, I am proud to be part of my network, but I am humbled by the chance to serve others. So you can see that I have, I think, good handle on pride versus humility. Um, I'd like to know your thoughts and how it shows up in your world. Now, I'm just going to say in this next section, I'm going to mention that networking is life. I'm going to say that there is an eighth sin that I will add, and maybe it isn't as so much a sin as a pet peeve of mine. I truly feel sorry for people who blame networking for their results or lack thereof. My belief is simple. Your network is simply a mirror that reflects your beliefs and attitudes back to you. So, the good, the bad, and the ugly here. The good, if you believe networking works, it will work for you. If you believe in abundance, you will find abundance. If you add value to and value your network, it will add value to you and value you. The bad, if you believe networking doesn't work, it won't work for you. If you believe in scarcity, you will find scarcity. If you are suspicious of others, they will be suspicious of you. And the ugly, if you believe networking is a waste of time, you will waste your time networking. If you believe your network owes you something, it will pay you nothing. And if you only network to close deals, you will struggle to close deals. This might sound overly philosophical, but I strongly believe that networking is not just something that I do to make a living. I believe that networking is life. I have met my closest friends through networking. I met my wife through networking. I've found most of my jobs through networking. I have found roommates through networking. I have solved countless life challenges through networking. I've found countless opportunities through networking. I'm teaching my young sons how to network. I love to learn, and I literally have read every book I can find on networking. And I have to admit, I have met a few questionable characters through networking, but the beautiful thing is my network helps me flush them out. So overall, I have to say that networking is integral to my life. It's how I learn new skills. It's how I meet new people. It's how I build new businesses. It's literally how I do everything in life. And by the way, book clubs are a great way to network because you meet like minded people who have similar interests. So, for the rest of the book, I just want to share the logistics. So, each sin and virtue are going to be a chapter, and we're going to talk about the value of your network as a portfolio versus the goose that lays the single golden egg. um, I could write a children's book on this. And by the way, I strongly encourage you, if you have kids, teach them networking skills. It will serve them through life. The soft skills of building relationships, building rapport, closing deals, following up, all of that are amazing within networking. I could have a chapter just on uses for networking, and we're going to talk about a little bit of that. Um, Here I just want to share introverts have a distinct advantage to networking. And this might sound a little counterintuitive because a lot of people say, oh, I'm an introvert, I can't network. Here's the inherent advantage that an introvert has. And I say this as an introvert. I don't like big events, I don't like large groups. I like small groups. I like fewer, deeper conversations. So, as an introvert, I'm not fond of small talk. I don't want to talk about the weather. I'd rather have two or three really deep, meaningful conversations than a dozen surface conversations. So, networkers who are introverts or introverts who are networkers, however you want to call it, have the advantage that we form fewer, deeper relationships. And that's an advantage because we get to know one another, we can find ways to serve one another. Extroverts have an advantage in that they'll meet more people, but it'll be more superficial, less quality, more quantity. So there's pros and cons to both. Personally, I think introverts have an advantage. Let's talk about what your superpower is in networking. There's, starting new conversations. there's carrying conversations forward, and then there's that follow up where you're taking those conversations to a natural close where they're becoming a client or a strategic partner. So find that superpower. Um, I could make a joke about angel food versus devil's food cake. I can't stress enough that I love networking and I believe in networking at all levels. Now, I'm just going to make sure I've covered as much as I can here very quickly. So, in each chapter, we want to share some ideas. Some of the definitions we're going to go through. I'd like to demystify the difference between a lead, an introduction, and a referral. And in each chapter, we're going to talk about redemption. So, for those who are committing the sin, how do we get redemption? There should be examples of both the redemption and the sin. And we want to share the damage a sin can ultimately cause. What are the outcomes that can come from committing these sins? And what is our mindset and skill set that we need to go with our gear set to ensure that we are not committing these sins? So that's my little overview of the seven deadly sins. I recognize there's some repetition in there. I will be turning this into the book, but I just wanted to get these thoughts out and to share them for feedback. So if you've got examples or stories that you'd like to share, I'd love to hear them in the comments below. Thank you.